we are going to work in an interministerial way to be able to reduce our carbon footprint. What we do in the Ministry of Energy in terms of the alternatives, what we do in your ministry, and I know that you have already had conversations about the debt-for-nature swaps, what we do in terms of our tree planting exercise, planting 1 million trees, what we are doing in terms of the Environmental Protection Department to ensure that our air qualities are controlled, in our ozone department to ensure that our ozone depleting substances are not damaging the atmosphere and that there are certain hydrocarbons not released. Again, there's a new conversation that we must be involved in as it relates to carbon markets and how we are going to ensure that we get profit for every single molecule of carbon dioxide as it stands. So, but I would let Ron Goodrich speak about, because he works intimately with not only the ozone department, but he is the officer responsible for let us having a policy in place to mitigate and militate and prevent the vagaries of natural disasters and climate change. Because as I speak, we can have a situation where one day we have a temperature rise of between 0.13 and 0.16 degrees Celsius, and the next day we can have flash floodings. This is the difficulty we are facing, and if we don't put a screeching halt to it, then life as we know as normal in Barbados may not be. And again, there is the Reef program, which encapsulates the whole adaptation philosophy about climate change, because we are looking at every single drop of water and how we can conserve it in a circular way, and then we are looking at in a sustainable developed way how we are going to incorporate people as part of the plan in terms of protecting from hurricanes and other natural disasters. We're looking at water runoff to your marine environment, all those things from truss anchors to rafter connectors. It is a holistic approach to dealing with the whole issue of circular Barbados. But Ron can have further discussions with you in terms of his responsibilities in the ministry. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Ford. Thank you, Minister Humphrey, for the question. When Barbados signed and ratified the Paris Agreement on climate change in 2016, we were then mandated as a country in a global environment to prepare what is called a nationally determined contribution. And this is a report that we submit to the Secretariat of the Convention, whereby Barbados outlines its plans and projects and programs to adapt to the adverse impacts of climate change, as well as to take action to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. And also we will identify our needs as it relates to finance, capacity building, technology development, and transfer. And right now, we are updating the first nationally determined contribution that we submitted. We're doing this through an interministerial effort, in particular with the Ministry of Finance, Economic Affairs, and Investment, particularly in the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Investment side, because one of the components of the updated NDC is going to be a portfolio of investment projects which will be available to other entities to assist the government through investment to realize what our targets and goals were. We started the process of updating the NDC around this time last year, and then of course we had our first national pause, and that really had a devastating impact on our work, because we then had to switch all of our plans to a virtual format, and we had to undertake all of the national consultations and meetings through virtual means. However, I think that we were very successful in bringing all these stakeholders together. We consulted through government, through the private sector, as well as the NGO and CSO community, and as well as the youth. And we bring all of those together to get their input into how Barbados's nationally determined contribution can be updated. The question was asked earlier, I think one of the first questions, is how we as a ministry have integrated environmental considerations into development planning. And the Ministry of Environment, for more than 15 years, has had a climate change committee with representation from the private sector, from government, of course, as well as the third sector. And I think that we've been very successful in getting a lot of the ministries, in particular in Barbados, to take on board climate change in their planning, in particular for estimates and their program budgets. A number of ministries in the government now have climate change units, and these include the Ministry of Agriculture, the Ministry of Health, and also they may not call them climate change units, but a lot of the work that is done, like for instance at the Ministry of Energy, can be considered as mitigation, whereby when they undertake projects that look at renewable energy where they undertake work that minimizes the use of fossil fuels, that can be considered as climate change work. And we have other work being done by the Ministry of Maritime Affairs and Blue Economy. So I think we, as a government, we have been very successful in mainstreaming, as it's called, climate change considerations into international development. Thank you.
Honourable member.
Thank you very much, Minister. Thank you, Ron. I just want the point to be made very clear that climate change is as real an issue for Barbados as any other issue. I mean, it's real for the fishermen, for people who make a living on the coast. It's real for all of us because it exposes us and it poses a risk. And so I understand that we may not think it is a sexy subject, but it is as real a subject for Barbados as any other subject. But my other two questions now are more specific to the nuts and bolts of our affairs. I noted in the estimates that the drainage service, I see you have stormwater management plans for which there's no funds allocated this year, but there were $6 million allocated last year. And I'm just wondering on an update on that plan. Was a plan produced? And the reason I'm concerned is because, as you know, stormwater runoff is a big issue in Barbados, and it is causing tremendous concern for me on Bay Shore. I have a few areas there where the stormwater runoff is removing all the sand. It is causing great problems. It is not only unsightly, but it is also unhealthy because sometimes it just stays there and the water turns green, and it's just filthy. But of course, there are deeper issues, as we saw with stormwater runoff in the north earlier this year. So I just wanted an update on what is happening there and how we are working collaboratively to address this major threat that Barbados faces with stormwater runoff that has literally become life-depriving for Barbadians and therefore needs to be addressed. And then my second question to follow is in relation to the Environmental Protection Department. Now, many of my constituents in St. Michael South ask me about derelict buildings, derelict cars. And many of us as MPs have approached EPD for, you have to go through a process where a notice is placed on the car. I would like some further understanding on that process. The number of buildings, perhaps, or cars that are normally addressed in a year. And so that my constituents would understand, because often someone would approach me about a derelict building and say, Minister, I need this, this dealt with, and you've approached EPD, and a while after, the house is still standing. And so I would just like the public of Barbados to understand how that process works in relation to removing these unsightly cars and a lot of these derelict buildings. Thanks.
Just let me speak to, and I would let Tora speak further on this issue in terms of the funds that you would have seen voted for last year. And you made reference to the fact that you see zero funds this year. That's because our ministry was attached umbilically to the Ministry of Transport and Works and Water and the previous administration. So that project has started about, 6-7 years ago in terms of the stormwater and the issues of water settlement and drainage in the whole town area. And it was a project that was co-funded by USAID and through the American government, of course. And I think Tara can speak to that because we have completed the project. I should think the contractors were paid up to end of this finance. Well, they are being paid as I speak. They still have 1 or 2 outstanding payments, but at the completion of the financial year, the project would no longer be under our remit. So Tora can speak on that.
Yes, Minister. As you said, the program was one being conducted between the government of Barbados and the United States Agency for International Development, USAID. It was being completed in this financial year. There have been no funds being voted for the next financial year under the Stormwater program. That program is no longer under the Ministry of Environment and National Beautification. It has gone back, I believe, to the ministry responsible for drainage. We have just completed the AMSET program this year, which did take care of, well, mainly last year, the works in Whole Town, which allowed us to manage or alleviate quite a bit of the flooding that would have occurred in Whole Town. The last thing that we had done was the construction of the check dam in Dunscombe, which would not only allow us to look at water as a nuisance, which it really shouldn't be looked at anyway in that fashion, but to look at water as a resource that will be trapped higher up in the watershed. So just to end by saying that the AMSET program under the Ministry of Environment and National Beautification has pretty much come to an end, and that is why you have not seen any funds voted for it in the next financial, or the coming financial year.
I will let EPD answer the question as it relates to the system that they use to identify the derelict vehicles and to respond to the complaints and to ensure that the vehicles are removed in a timely manner.
Sorry. Very quickly, Minister.
Oh, sorry.
Chair, just very quickly, I just want to say thanks to EPD as well. I don't want to make it sound as if I'm just beating on them, because they've done a lot of work for me in St. Michael South. I just want it to be clear that there is a process, because I saw very recently on the front page of a daily paper a resident complaining about a house for which we've already contacted EPD. So I just want that process to be made clear, but I also want to thank EPD for the work they've done for us.
Thank you. I will now allow the EPD, Ms. Lisa St. House, to respond.
The Environmental Protection Department, we identify derelict buildings through a number of ways. Our environmental inspectors might identify the buildings, or we may receive complaints from the general public or sometimes from environmental health also. Once we have identified the building and it is deemed to be derelict, as required under the Health Services Act, a notice is served to the owner of the land for the building, and that is usually sent via registered mail. The notice would give the owner a specified period of time with which to remedy the situation in terms of improving the structure itself, if it needs demolishing, or sometimes the area around the structure needs to be debushed, etc. Once the period for the notices have expired, the department would then publish a list of derelict buildings in the newspaper. Once again, this is a requirement under the Health Services Act. The notice in the paper would once again give the owner an additional period with which to remedy the situation. Once the notices are published in the paper, we would usually find that some owners would contact the department. Some people will actually demolish the buildings themselves. But once the period has expired, the buildings where nothing has been done, the department would then seek to issue contracts for the demolition of those buildings. The invitation for bid for the contracts are also published in the newspaper, so anyone can bid for the contracts. Once the contracts have been received and they've been reviewed, contracts would then be issued for the demolition of the buildings. The department would also, or inspectors, once the buildings have been demolished, or the inspectors would once again visit the site to ensure that the work done by the contractor meets the standards of the department. Once that is done, the contractors would be paid, and that would be, I guess, the end of the process. In the current financial year, we would have demolished We would have published 127 derelict buildings. This was done in June 2020. For varying reasons, 39 buildings were removed from that list. I omitted to mention that owners of the buildings may also request what is called a stay of execution to give them additional time other than what was given in the notice to remedy the situation on the land. So that is one of the reasons why 39 of those buildings were removed from the list. And we then proceeded to demolish 62 buildings last year. With respect to derelict vehicles, the process is similar in that notices are also served, and the process is also outlined in the Health Services Act. And once again, once nothing is done to remedy the situation, the department would issue contracts for the removal and disposal of those vehicles.
Thank you.
What I want to add is that I have said it already for the morning, that persons now have to have a sense of responsibility. The Health Service Act also speaks to those persons who are exempted from the payment system, the indigent, the disabled community, the elderly who's on welfare, the elderly and those persons on welfare are persons with special needs and special circumstances. And we understand that there will always be those situations and circumstances. What I'm saying is that we are now looking to put a policy in place where persons who can afford and are in a position to deconstruct those derelict buildings or move their vehicles and refuse to, that when we and the department do carry out this enforcement, and then we have to remove the vehicles at a cost of government, that we be looking at all measures to recoup our money. I think that's where the conversation has to go, where we will get back the money that we spend. And it is high time that Barbadians have to take responsibility for their behaviors, because it is really the anthropogenic behaviors of persons that are responsible for a lot of things we have from the pollutants back down. So this is something that we have to look at in Barbados, and I think that the conversation is now ready for us to explore these things.
You are next. You and yeah. You don't want to ask. Thank you, honorable member for St. Philip South.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, let me start by congratulating the Minister and his team for the enthusiasm and effervescence that they have brought in continuing the work that was started by the Honorable Member for St. Michael East in his ministry. I am indeed happy to note that the Minister, Manager of NCC, Mr. Ryan Alves, and indeed the Manager of SSA have kept at pace in making sure that, one, our communities are kept clean. The Clean and Green program is indeed a very good initiative that I strongly support, and I want to use this opportunity to thank the Minister and Mr. Alves for bringing that program to my constituency, starting at Gemswick. For the SSA, I'm indeed happy to note that we now have trucks on the road that are collecting garbage on a daily basis, and we would have seen a reduction to almost 100% in complaints with regards to garbage collection, which wasn't the case when we first became government. I am happy to note that the performance of the ministry to date is one that sits well with the people of Barbados. But I do have a couple of concerns and questions that I would like to have addressed. And I would first want to ask the minister if at any time would they contemplate a use of SCIP's policy. Currently what happens is that a SCIP is located in a community or on a beach, and almost anything is entered into that SCIP. Dead animals, old furniture, suitcases, almost anything. And the time has come where if we are going to reach 21st century requirement, then we need to start to look at the nuisances in our society, and this is certainly one. And I would want for the minister to tell me if in fact they are considering use of skips policy in parks and beaches and within communities, which will help with the reduction of the disposal of animals and old furniture and those sorts of things in the skips that from time to time may last for a fairly long time before they may be removed.
But of course, Minister, I don't think that the ink dry before you ask that question, because it's not only a policy, but I have had conversation both with Prime Minister and the AG on ensuring that in the not too distant future, that community skips will be just for that purpose. Communities, and that there's the delivery of bulk waste and certain material, that will become a thing of the past in terms of what goes into the skips, because the skip really truly the skip is put there for a community to utilize and to have the benefits of. So your point, your question, and your comments are very, very, very accurate in terms of what we need to do going forward. I don't know, I think that I can let the chairman expound a little more on the fact that the skip program is now something that we are rolling out, that we are getting a number of skips to bear in communities. And he can also talk about...
Honorable Minister, sorry to interrupt, but the question was on policy, which lies at you rather than your team.
Yeah, but the policy question I answered, I was just wanting him to look at the fact and to give an update on the skip program that we are having, so that he can speak about the skip, and then I will let the general manager speak about any challenges she's having with the skips. But the policy, as I said just now, is something that we are going to be bringing to bear, because we understand is a concern.
Okay,
but
we have to keep the questions concise, so if that were the question, we will come back to the skip issue again.
No problem.
Madam Chair, I wish to follow up with dumping sites, and this is something that is of particular interest to me as Minister of Agriculture and Food Security. And I wish to raise the alarm with regard to the many dumping sites that we have right across Barbados, but particularly in St. Philip. Madam Chair, in your constituency between Sanford, Tree Houses, Bailey's Plantation and River, that entire area is used as a dumping site where people who collect garbage
and Fairfield, don't forget.
And Fairfield will use that area for dumping of almost anything under the sun. I'm surprised that we haven't found bodies over there as yet, but we found everything else so far. And therefore, Madam Chair, I have to traverse the area as Minister of Agriculture. Sometimes you see vehicles pulling over there. They wait until you pass. They even turn around and come back. And the time has come where this area must be flagged for surveillance, so that we can bring an end to the illegal dumping practices that are taking place within that locale. But equally, at Edgecombe Plantation and Pussum Bridge, you have a huge amount of dumping taking place over there, where people literally come from any part of the island, and rather than go to the location where garbage is received, they will come to these plantations and dump garbage illegally, whilst collecting payment from people for transportation. There are no fees anymore for carrying the garbage to the garbage site, but they find it convenient to go to plantations and farmyards to dump garbage. And again, I would wish for this to be flagged as one of the things that we would get immediate action on for surveillance. And Foul Bay in my constituency, I mean, Foul Bay has reached the point now where I've spoken about it several times. I posted it on Facebook. I've asked the manager of the NCC to remove the skip so that we can stop the dumping that is taking place there. But yet still people continue to dump everything they possibly can think of at Foul Bay. Foul Bay is a place for recreation. and it is unthinkable that Barbadians will still come to Foul Bay to dump garbage in the manner in which it is being done. And I would like also for the minister to tell me if there are any plans to right this wrong by the people of St. Philip South by putting a surveillance program in place there as well.
And I know that you will also say that the dumping of garbage is also a threat to food security and the agricultural space. The reality is that, and I know you would agree with me when I say that, it is difficult to legislate a culture. If there's not a shift, a serious paradigm in the way how people treat the disposal of garbage and dumping in our gullies and our areas, and I mean, there's only so much we can do in terms of putting surveillance cameras. I remember a couple of weeks ago, we put a surveillance camera on one particular site that was being used as a dump site. And the next week, person stopped putting it there because they found they found that we had a camera. They found out that, and they put the garbage further down the road. And they will do this all across the entire landscape of Barbados because their intent. That's why I said it is very difficult to legislate a culture. We know to have schools. And I remember the little conversation with the Maria when she told Orlando Bloom, this is not who we are as a country. And it has to start from the children, because the book of Isaiah said a little child will lead us. And I'm saying that it has to start from the schools. We have to start the education and the conversation from as far as reception and come right up, where every single Barbadian understands that this is not who we are. And this is not the way how we are supposed to live as a country and treat to the environment. I don't know how better way I can discuss this other than to tell you that Barbadians must see Barbados as an integral part of their being, and understand the beauty and aesthetics of this country is just as important as getting on the morning, putting on lipstick and doing your hair.
Thank you.
But
what are the remedies?
But I want to say, and that's what we're going to know. Because I want to say to you that the legislation is there under the Health Service Act. And once those perpetrators are caught, this minister will not be asking anyone to clean up. The police and the entire legislative system will deal with them. As simple as that. Because the legislation is there under the Health Service Act to deal with persons who dump illegally. Once they are caught, the hardest point sometimes is to police these persons, because they are very smart in their behavior. We had an issue the other day in St. John, and we recognized what was happening. And although as much cameras and surveillance you can put up, persons always try to find a way to dodge the system and do what they want to do anyhow. So we have to start the conversations from the school. That's where the project management unit and the biodiversity unit is going into the schools right now and sensitizing persons about the way how they can treat to their garbage and the disposal of garbage. This is the conversation that must be had in every single household, in every single space, according to the good old Belgium, but start in every nook and cranny, because this is the only way. But there is legislation there, and we are going to make sure that once those persons are caught, they will have to answer to the legislative system.
Final comment, Madam Chair, if you would allow.
Sure.
The issue of large and small trucks. There are some communities in Barbados where the large trucks simply cannot turn around, and you will find that in those instances garbage may not be collected. I have, for example, in Gemswick, in my constituency again, where there's one lady whose garbage often is not collected simply because the large truck can't get down in the space. And this has happened simply because the owner to the front of her determined that he doesn't want anybody or any vehicles to traverse his land. So he has put up a guard wall and left a very small space. And now this lady cannot get her garbage collected on a frequent basis. I believe your PR person would have seen this firsthand and would have dealt with it. But I would like to recommend that consideration be given to a small truck going in that area so that she can get her garbage collected. This is at Gemswick. And also I wish to recommend that the persons going out with the trucks, and they do a tremendous job under all types of conditions, removing all types of garbage. But I'd also like to, in addition to thanking them, ask them that when they put back the garbage receptacles, they put them back in a proper place rather than just throw them anywhere and drive away.
I want to thank you for your observation, Minister, because I understand the concern, and I want to say to you that it is a problem that we are dealing with every single day, and the challenges associated with getting into communities and the trucks getting in, because there's either a derelict car in the way, there's either an inconsiderate association with neighbors where persons block passages from other persons. This is something that we are challenged with at the Sanitation Service Authority. And I know that you are the minister that deals with the apiculture and bees and stuff, but we have acts in this ministry too, little small acts. And we have put in our estimates, and the manager of sanitation can talk about what we call the acts, the little small trucks that go into the small areas of the community, because we believe, like yourself, that we need to have big trucks for the big areas and smaller trucks for smaller areas, so we can get rid of some of these unsightly skips that are placed in the community. But the manager of the sanitation can speak to that.
Good afternoon. In this year's estimates, we have made provision for the purchase of 4 small trucks, the ants to which Minister referred. So hopefully when we get those trucks, we'll be able to go into the small areas where the big trucks cannot now traverse.
Thank you. Honourable Member for St. Philip West.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I have 3 questions, and I'll ask first and allow you to answer. The first one relates to the Natural Heritage Department. In its statement under the sub-program 0555, it says that the Natural Heritage Department is mandated to upgrade, diversify, and protect Barbados's nature tourism product through the development of sites that can serve as attractions and recreational areas, while providing opportunities for scientific research and the creation of business opportunities. It is the last part of it on the scientific research and the creation of business opportunities that I'm very interested in knowing what are the programs that are currently undertaken by the department in these particular areas, because as the minister responsible for culture, I have a number of people who come in to me from time to time looking at things like beekeeping and looking at creating a medicinal herbal industry. So I'm just curious as to what is available under the Natural Heritage Department.
And to further elucidate on your point, we are also responsible for gullies and ecosystem management in terms of the natural heritage, to bring that touristic project and product to the gullies and the natural environs. And also that our ministry is signatory to the Ramsar Convention, which deals with wetlands, and there's a wetland in St. Andrew there's one in the Chancery Lane area, and then Grand Hall, a natural ecosystem and wetland. So the Natural Heritage Department, they're certainly responsible for a lot of other things as well, but I will let Mr. Steve Devonish speak on the area as you asked about the scientific interventions and the scientific
research and
business
development.
Right, the research and the business development for the Natural Heritage Department.
Thank you, Minister. In terms of the reference to protected areas and also tourism development, sometimes our projects are directly singular projects, and sometimes this work occurs through partnerships with other ministries. Sometimes this work occurs through partnerships within the ministry itself, the biodiversity unit, the botanical gardens, and other components. Because of our resource challenge base, we tend to more focus on specific projects. For example, in the coming year, we will start a regional project which is called Sustainable Land Management, and this is a regional project that is encompassing 8 Caribbean countries, including Barbados, and we're looking for co-financing from the Jeff facility. This is a project will be research-based. It'll be looking at spaces within the national park. It'll be looking at livelihoods. There's a climate change component to it, and also it's a matter of mainstreaming sustainable land management. The research itself does not occur very often in a specific project, but sometimes we partner with the University of the West Indies, where we may provide funding for particular research aspects, whether it be ecosystem research or other types of research. In addition to contributing to tourism development, this occurs in a planning perspective. Very often when planning applications are submitted for development within Historic Bridgeton Garrison or within the national park, these have a very important community component and livelihoods component. And through our regular approach and our regular contribution in the planning and development, research will emanate from that particular area. In many instances in the past, we would have worked with communities, and as the minister alluded to earlier, when we work with communities, it's an idea of trying to find out what that community would require, how we can assist that community. The community work and the community research sometimes is, I would say, based in a simplistic way. It can be as simple as helping students with SBAs, working closely with schools in terms of providing research material and support information for their respective projects. Very often, you might look at a research project, you can think it's not environmentally related, but the provision of some of our reading material, some of our previous studies and assessments would work. We also look at gully assessment. We would look at planning developments as they relate to natural heritage conservation areas. And as the minister quite rightly alluded to, there's the Graham Hall Swamp as a natural heritage conservation area. There's also one in Chancery Lane. And then there's the national park that starts at St. Lucie and comes as far south of Sconset Bay, and comes as far inland as Harrison's Cave Zone of Special Environmental Control. And the most notable one that would have occurred over the years would have been the redevelopment of Harrison's Cave. Notwithstanding the physical infrastructure, there were some over 150 recommendations, many community-based, some relating to gully activities, some related to ecosystem work. And when we pull these things together, that's where you will find there are strands of research which we refer to for students who will come in to do stuff from time to time. But the key fact, and to some extent limitation, is that there are so many communities who are interested in this type of work that we try to work in specific areas, and where we have a project, we will then try to work through the schools because we cannot cover as much as we would like to cover. But in terms of a lot of the other things related to biodiversity, related to herbs and stuff like that, there are other offices in the ministry, for example, the National Botanical Garden, the Biodiversity Program, and there are other components of the ministry which will pursue this work on a day-to-day basis, notwithstanding the remit that the department has.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Earlier, the Honorable Leader of the Opposition spoke to the problem of loud noise pollution. We have and continue to have a problem across this country with indiscriminate burning. I want to know where you stand, and especially when it comes to things like what we've seen on a number of sites where you have tires that are being burnt and burned for days on end, and we are talking about recycling. And if I may, I would like to suggest that a quick look at YouTube, and one would see what people are doing with tires all across the world in terms of using them for making furniture and all sorts of things. And maybe this is something that could be spearheaded by the ministry in its efforts to do upcycling and things like that. But as it relates though to the burning of stuff and tires and all these things across the country, what is the position of the ministry, and what are your plans to tackle this problem?
First of all, let me say that under the Health Services Act and the nuisances regulations, smoke, burning of fire and creating smoke is a nuisance. And any person who comes contrary to this Health Services Act, there could be exposed to the full extent of the law. And as far as I know, in order for a person to burn or to create fires, they now have to apply through the fire service. That is as far as I know. But under the Health Service Act, once a person is caught burning stuff or lighting fires, they can be charged. So I think it's a matter of policing. with respect to the terrace and what we intend to do with the terrace, I would like the chairman of the Sanitation Service Authority answer to that query.
Good day, honorable member. The Sanitation Service Authority, recognizing the substantive issue associated with tire disposal, and we are receiving hundreds of thousands of tires every year. You've mentioned the possible dangers and difficulties with fires associated with that storage. Has planned a project involving a tire shredder and a recyclable program with private enterprise, where the tires, as opposed to be just stocked in our landfill, will be actually utilized for further production, possibly being utilized in the paving of our roads. Within this year's estimate, you will see a sum set aside for the acquisition of a tire shredder, and we are actively in discussion with some members of private enterprise in terms of how we can bring that to a recyclable program that can be utilized for the benefit of the nation.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And my last question is, Minister, this one might be a little ticklish, but I have to ask. In terms of the farming community, for a long time now, they've been complaining about the threat of monkeys to crops. And I know that your ministry would be responsible for biodiversity and the preservation of plant life and animal life and all the other things. Where do you stand in helping to deal with this particular problem for the farming community?
Just let me first start by saying that we in the government don't operate in silo, and I would not distance myself from the question at all. Although there are monkeys that will really squarely fall under the Ministry of Agriculture, we, as you said, we are signatory to the CITES, which is the Convention on International Trade of Endangered Species. At the different appendices, we talk about species which will become endangered because of mankind and mankind behavior. They may be endangered become endangered because of trade practices. What we are saying in the ministry is that there must be a scientific approach to dealing with the monkeys. As much as we would like to speak to the issues with the farmers and try to appease their concern, there is a greater issue in terms of conserving our biodiversity. And monkeys, and the ones that we have in Barbados, are the best seed distributors in the world. They are responsible for distributing seeds and keeping our forestry. So they have biological diverse potential, and they have importance in terms of the whole ecosystem's management. They are able to bring fertility to soil. They are, with their action, they eat small insects from off the leaves, even mosquito larvae. So there are a lot of advantages and potential with the monkeys. The challenge is to make sure that we have that balance, so that when we